Thomas Drake. I'm a civil liberties activist. I used to be a senior executive at NSA and became a whistleblower for government wrongdoing, illegalities, and massive fraud, waste, and abuse.
So just quickly tell us about the NDAA case today and where you think you see it going.
Well, I'm very much a part of it. It was an amicus brief that was actually written and submitted by the Government Accountability Project through the representing attorneys and firms for the plaintiffs. And what is extremely frightening about Section 1021 of the NDAA, I'm just going to say it right here, is it reminds me, because during the latter part of the Cold War, I became an expert in East Germany. And it reminds me, in terms of German history, of Article 48 of the Weimar Republic. You read Article 48, that was used as the covering excuse, as the covering mechanism to enable a whole lot of other things that violated the rights of citizens under their constitution at that time in the Weimar Republic. That's what's happening in this country, in a nutshell. And we're moving now even beyond what I was charged under the Espionage Act. I was turned into an enemy of the state. That was bad enough. At least I still had access to the court of law, to a due process. I had rights. And as much as the government didn't like that, right, they had to make their case in a court of law within the third branch of government, doing those checks and balances against the executive branch, okay? So here, we're taken to a whole nother level. Under it's abrogating under the commander-in-chief responsibilities as defined under the Constitution. Now, just forget the rest of that Constitution, but in terms of the military side, because he is the commander-in-chief, as the President of the United States, we'll just now exercise military authority, where we were unable, okay, to have either constitutional law and other related statutes. How convenient is that? So all the things that we're doing overseas, we're just going to bring them home, but the only way we can bring those home is we literally have to get rid of most of the Constitution. The only thing we're going to leave is the military authority part. Now, that line in the Constitution is extraordinarily clear. You do not breach that line. So one thing the Constitution ensures was civilian rule, okay, civilians were in charge of the government, not the military. What's happening is that even that is now being subverted and corrupted, and now increasingly the military authority. And so the real frightening thing about the NDAA is that if the government decides they don't like you, and they can make up, because that's what they did with me. I was told from the inside, they determined you were a bad guy. It didn't matter what the evidence was. It didn't matter. You were a bad guy. We've targeted you. We're going to go after you, and we're going to make life extremely difficult. In fact, we're going to make life so difficult that it'll never be the same again, to the point where I was threatened with spending the rest of my life in prison. Now, 2 years later, they indicted me, and I was facing 35 years in prison. And my life was literally turned upside down. This takes it to a whole new frightening level, because now, hey, you're walking down the street and we've determined that you're an enemy of the state or the equivalent, or you're providing substantive support to a group that we've determined, okay, is associated with others that we've defined as enemies of the state. Guess what? Not only will we capture you, we'll detain you. And there is no due process. There is no recourse. You have no rights. You don't even have an attorney. And any evidence that we present against you is secret, and we're the ones defining what that evidence is. Totally corrupt system. Absolutely corrupt. But that's what we're facing. But that's precisely what we've been doing. The government had a lot of practice at this overseas. Now we're bringing it home. So if they said, see, the only authority they could cite, the prosecution cite in the case today, the only authority they could cite was the authorization, and I'm going to emphasize that these, to use military force. It's after 9/11. Military force. Because they had been declared, I understand, the world at that time was behind the United States. But remember what the government also said? In terms, no, to the fullest extent of the law. Remember, we weren't at that time just going to go out and drone the enemy. We were going to actually, and we've done it. We've actually done it in this country under Article 3 courts. There's any number of terrorists, okay, that were actually convicted in Article 3 courts. But guess what we increasingly went to? Extra legal, extrajudicial, extra constitutional. The pattern is clear. We're now bringing that home. The chickens are coming home to roost. The battlefield has been defined as not just overseas and outside U.S. borders. It's everywhere, anywhere, at any time, and we're the ones in secret, the executive power, we're the ones saying when and where and who.
It's amazing, too.
Including Americans. Oh, okay. Sure.
Well, I do appreciate, I was there at your speech today. It was a fiery, passionate speech. If there was one thing from that speech you could tell people out there who haven't seen it yet, what's the one thing you would mention?
The Constitution that I took an oath to support and defend is increasingly just a very, very thin veneer of a piece of paper. It's hollowed out. And this is all happening with increasing rapidity since 9/11. This particular case, this NDAA case that the plaintiffs in a lawsuit brought against the U.S. government and the Obama administration is proof positive of yet another breach of that Constitution. But in this case, they want to use military authority as the rule of law. That absolutely turns the Constitution on its head. So it is ruled by men, ruled by force, ruled by other than law, not rule of law under the Constitution. Under the Constitution, no one is above it. This takes rule of law outside of the Constitution, corrupts it, and places it into simply we're the authority. We will determine what the law is. We'll determine who is subject to the law. We'll even determine who we can capture, detain, arrest, whatever. And we're the ones that have the evidence. You have no recourse. You have no right to an attorney. You have no right of any due process whatsoever. You cannot come before a jury of your peers. There is no probable cause. There is no beyond reasonable doubt to convict you. We're the judge, jury, and executioner. Now, what form of government is that, I tell you? That's not the form of government. That's an alien form of government. That's not a constitutional form of government. James Madison, 1786, because of the failures of the Articles of Confederation in the early years, he sat there at his estate in Virginia, looking out to the Blue Ridge, saying, what's the best way to govern ourselves? He had a 4,000-volume library. He had to make a determination. He's considered the father of the Constitution. And even the Constitution was insufficient. We had to add the 10 Bill of Rights, the original 10 amendments. This country had a revolution because of the egregious violations of civil liberties, freedoms, and rights. That's 240 years ago, right? Almost 240 years ago, plus. That whole period. And we had a revolution. And blood was spilled. I will tell you, given my own experience, the foundation of our rights are the First and Fourth Amendment, followed by, obviously, the Fifth and Sixth Amendments, as well as others. But if you don't have a First or Fourth Amendment, we don't have America. You don't have a First or Fourth Amendment, I can't speak like this freely, right? I'll be suppressed and censored. You don't have a First Amendment, I can't assemble with those I wish to assemble with peacefully. If we don't have a First Amendment, I can't actually believe what I want to believe. Oh, thought crime, right? Ooh, you're believing the wrong thing, thought crime. If we don't have a First Amendment, I cannot bring redress of grievance against my own government because they're claiming sovereign immunity. They're claiming executive privilege. They're claiming state secrets. It somehow supersedes my rights as an individual. We don't have a First Amendment. There is no freedom of the press. And we have a Fourth Amendment. No one, that's the right to be left alone, fundamentally. Without those two, the grand experiment that was launched in 1789 is no more. And that's why I fear for the Republic.
I was removed. I was definitely in the way. I was very outspoken against the war, and I was subsequently arrested on the Patriot Act and locked up in prison on Carswell Air Force Base while the government rewrote the history books.
For providing you and our enemies the information. That is why the legal proceedings for United States versus Private First Class Bradley Manning are being conducted in secrecy at Fort Meade.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.